President, we have a national emergency.
This is one of the things that we can shoot first and ask questions later. Normally you can't do that.
All of a sudden these trees started moving out of the way. They parted for me. And then I came out into this opening, and there where I saw Jesus Christ.
Back in 1927, an American socialist, Norman Thomas, 6 times candidate for president on the Socialist Party ticket, said the American people would never vote for socialism. But he said under the name of liberalism, the American people will adopt every fragment of the socialist program. He is more imminent.
James Madison, in 1788, speaking to the Virginia Convention, said, "Since the general civilization of mankind, I believe there are more instances of the abridgment of the freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachment of those in power than by violent and sudden usurpations."
When men were free.
Broadcasting live from a secret location buried deep below the earth, you're about to make a connection to the signs of the times. W. Dean Shook is live on the air right now.
Welcome to End Time News. I'm your host, W. Dean Shook, and I am just tickled pink to be able to bring you news you're not going to hear anywhere else. We're going to talk about Israel today, and we're going to start with a story from Reuters where Sweden is to become the first major European country to recognize the state of Palestine. Sweden's new center-left government will recognize the state of Palestine in a move that will make it the first European country to take this step. And the U.S. State Department spokesman Jen Psaki called Sweden's decision premature, citing the need to first resolve final status issues. The UN General Assembly approved the de facto recognition of the sovereign state of Palestine in 2012, but the European Union and most EU countries have yet to give official recognition. The Swedish Prime Minister said during his inaugural address in Parliament, the conflict between Israel can only be solved with a two-state solution, negotiated in accordance with international law. The two-state solution requires mutual recognition and a will to peaceful coexistence. Sweden will therefore recognize the state of Palestine. Within the UN, some countries such as Hungary, Poland, Slovakia recognize Palestine, but they did so before joining this 28-member bloc. The former center-right government would not recognize Palestine as the Palestinian Authority did not control their territory. Palestinians want an independent state in the West Bank and Gaza with its capital in East Jerusalem. While Gaza's boundaries are clearly defined, the precise territory of what would constitute Palestine in the West Bank and East Jerusalem will only be determined via negotiations with Israel on this two-state solution, negotiations which are currently suspended. Now, as we all know, while the U.S. claims support for Israel, President Obama seems to be sending a little bit different message. This from the New York Post. Benjamin Netanyahu says the White House criticism of Israel is un-American. Out of Jerusalem, Israel's Prime Minister dismissed a recent White House rebuke of Israeli settlement construction, saying in comments broadcast on Sunday that the criticism goes against American values. The tough words by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu threatened to deepen a rift with the White House over Israeli construction in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. These are areas that were captured in the Israeli 1967 Six-Day War and claimed by the Palestinians as part of a future independent state. Israel came under fire last week after a Jerusalem city official signed the final go-ahead for construction of a new housing development in East Jerusalem. A day earlier, an ultra-nationalist Jewish group said dozens of settlers would move in 6 apartment buildings purchased in the heart of a predominantly Arab neighborhood of East Jerusalem. Israel says East Jerusalem is part of its capital and considers Jewish housing developments there to be a neighborhood of the city. But the international community, including the United States, does not recognize Israel's annexation of the area and considers construction there to be illegitimate settlement activity. While Mr. Netanyahu said, the idea that we have this ethnic purification as a condition of peace, I think, is anti-peace. In a striking public rebuke last week, the Obama administration warned Israel that the new project would distance Israel from even its closest allies and raise questions about its commitment to seek peace with Palestinians. A one-country, two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Would this be a peace agreement? Maybe a 7-year peace agreement? Now let me be clear on this. I'm not Jewish. I am, however, a Christian. Both the Jews and the Christians worship the same God, the one true living God, Yahweh. What does the Bible say about a future Palestinian state? We'll discover that right after this short break. I'll be right back.
There is a sense in the world. There's a sense among believers. There's a sense among unbelievers. There's a sense among all peoples that things are unhinged. The Middle East is unhinged with uprisings, revolutions, and where's this heading?
How are followers of Jesus to relate to all of these things? How do they relate to biblical prophecy?
America is in spiritual, moral crisis. Values are changing, and so rapidly, that have not happened in the history of man.
How are level-headed, responsible Christians to relate to the testimony of the biblical prophets and the unfolding of chaos throughout the world?
Not just believers are wondering, is this a sign of the end?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. These are the stakes. We either stand up to supporters of terrorism, or we and our allies risk losing the freedom we cherish. We must not let the jihadist government of Iran get a nuclear bomb. President Obama has had opportunity to stop them, but he's failing. Join with us and let's secure America now.
All right, on November 29, 2012, 138 nations passed UN Resolution 6719 on the question of Palestine. The resolution expressed support for the right of the Palestinian people to their independent state of Palestine. Now, in light of this and the overwhelming global bias against Israel, we have to consider what God says about the future of both the nation of Israel and Palestine. When you look at the biblical passages that talk about the return of Christ, it's clear what he'll have to confront: the persecution, the marginalization, the unjust treatment of Israel by the nations of the earth, despite the fact that the anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist propaganda are widely accepted even by the large segments of the Christian church. The Bible is clear that when Jesus returns, he'll specifically execute judgment against the enemies of Israel. Now, according to Joel, just prior to the return of Christ, a large number of nations will invade Israel, surround the city of Jerusalem. Joel tells us that Jesus will execute judgment against all parties who are involved in this invasion, as well as any who force the dividing of his land. That's important. Joel 3:2 says, "I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. Then I will enter into judgment with them that are on behalf of my people and my inheritance, Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, and have divided up my land." And it's clear from this prophecy that a distinct Palestinian state is going to become a reality. Joel goes on to speak of the Lord executing vengeance against those from Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and the Palestinian territories who have engaged in violence against the people of Israel. Joel 3:4 says, "What are you to me, O Tyre, Sidon, and the regions of Philistia? Are you rendering me a recompense? But if you do recompense me swiftly and speedily, I will return your recompense on your head." Joel 3:19 through 21 says, "Egypt shall be a desolation, and Edom a desolate wilderness, because of violence against the people of Judah, for they have shed innocent blood in their land. But Judah will be an inhabitant forever, and Jerusalem for all generations. And I will avenge their blood which I have not avenged, for the Lord dwells in Zion. Now, according to Ezekiel, Jesus comes back to execute judgment against those who cling to the ancient hatred directed toward the Jewish people and shed the blood of the children of Israel. Is this why Israel has always been so hated? Here's what this passage says. Ezekiel 35, 5 and 7. Because you have an ancient hatred, you have shed the blood of the children of Israel by the power of the sword at the time of their calamity. Therefore, as I live, says the Lord God, I will prepare you for blood, and blood shall pursue you. Since you have not hated blood, therefore blood shall pursue you. And according to Isaiah, the day of the Lord, or the return of Jesus, is specifically a time when the Lord will vindicate Israel in the midst of the legal cause or the controversy of Zion. Isaiah 34:8. For the Lord has a day of vengeance, a day of recompense for the cause of Zion. So while it's clear that Jesus comes back to stand with and defend the oppressed and persecuted nation of Israel, and even more shocking to some is the fact that the Bible also specifically describes the utter devastation and judgment of Gaza and the whole of the Palestinian territory. The prophet Zephaniah, in speaking of the day of the Lord, warns all men to seek righteousness, seek humility. Perhaps you will be hidden in the day of the Lord's anger. Then comes a very stark description of what's ahead for the Palestinian state when Jesus returns. Here's what it says in Zephaniah 2:4-7. For Gaza will be abandoned. Woe to the inhabitants of the seacoast. The word of the Lord is against you, O Canaan, land of the Philistines, and I will destroy you so that there will be no inhabitants. So the seacoast will be pastures, with caves for shepherds and folds for flocks, and the coast will be for the remnant of the house of Judah. They will pasture on it. In the house of Ashkelon, they will lie down at evening, for the Lord their God will care for them and restore their fortune. Now, according to this prophecy, the future Palestinian state will be destroyed and abandoned for the Jewish people to inhabit. So what is this two-state solution? Will it bring peace? Well, I thought the two-state solution was dead. John Kerry made a speech in Jordan saying that peace talks will resume and are scheduled to begin in Washington, D.C., that there's been an agreement made, and it's the final status negotiations in the process of formalities between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Each side has chosen to make difficult choices, sacrifices in order to make this process possible. That's what John Kerry says. Israel says something different, but here's what John Kerry says. Not only will Israel and the Palestinians be involved in this peace plan, but there are 57 mostly Muslim nations that are standing ready to make peace with Israel, according to Kerry. The European Union has taken the steps to orchestrate the whole deal. They have a 7-year peace plan already in place. The EU is already planning to only recognize Israel according to the Green Zone, the borders that were set in 1949. Others say it'll be for the 1967 lines. The agreement will be attractive to many as it promises security and stability and prosperity for the region. In this plan, much of the West Bank and Gaza would be given to the Palestinians, with East Jerusalem as their capital. How significant is this 7-year peace plan and the dividing of the land of Israel? Is this biblical prophecy? We're in a very unusual time right now, because 2014 to 2015, there are 4 blood moons that are coming to be seen over Israel. And it's during a time of the feast days. And it's also a Shemitah year. So we have the tetrad, the 4 blood moons, falling on the feast days and the Shemitah year. This combination will not happen for another 400 years. We seem to be prime for something. Now understand, God doesn't have to do anything, but we sure look like we're primed for it. And God always puts signs in the